Hello, my name is Sean Sperry. I am with the IBM Software Group. In this video, we're going to talk about integration of Tivoli Storage Manager for virtual environments with Tivoli Storage Manager for databases at the version 7.1.1 level. And specifically, what we're going to do is do a restore of a SQL Server database where we backed up the virtual machine that it was on using Tivoli Storage Manager for virtual environments. So let's get started with an overview of what's called Cooperative Application Support. And what this means is when you're using data protection for VMware, you can protect certain applications, specifically Microsoft Exchange and Microsoft SQL Server, on the VMware virtual machines that you're backing up using data protection for VMware. And the way that you do that is you use this include.vm tsm vss statement in the data mover options file when you do the backup for the specific virtual machines that host Microsoft Exchange and Microsoft SQL Server. Now when you do that, those applications are notified using VSS that they're about to be backed up. Some metadata is created and they are placed in a consistent state so that the application can be used for restore from the virtual machine backup. Now there is a little bit of additional functionality for SQL Server as opposed to Exchange. With SQL Server, you can optionally choose to either keep the transaction logs, the SQL logs, or truncate the SQL logs during the virtual machine backup. Now, what you can do is once you have a virtual machine backup that was created with this option, you can restore the components of the underlying application, either SQL Server or Exchange, without restoring the whole virtual machine. So what you do is you just point to the virtual machine backup on the Tivoli Storage Manager server, and then you can get to the various components to do an application level restore. Now the methodologies, capabilities, and components that you use to do this are a little different depending on whether you're using Microsoft Exchange or Microsoft SQL Server. And in this video, I want to specifically concentrate on SQL Server. So as I just mentioned, with SQL Server you can use this include.vm tsm vss on your data mover. And if you do that, there are two things you must do in order to get a successful backup and be able to access that backup with a restore. First, you have to set the SQL Server credentials on the data mover using this dsmc set password command. And you also have to give data protection for SQL access to that virtual machine so that when you go to restore a database, it can see the backup. And the way you do that is with this dsmc set access command. Now, when you're ready to do a restore, what you need to do is go to the SQL Server where you're going to access the virtual machine from which you're going to pull the backup. And you need to make sure that the Tivoli Storage Manager for VMware recovery agent and license is installed on that virtual machine. And also in the data protection for SQL, you need to set the data center node name that you use to do the backup in TSM for virtual environments. And if you do that, then you'll be able to restore the SQL Server database directly from the virtual machine backup. You won't have to restore the virtual machine. You can just bring up the TDP for SQL and point to the virtual machine backup and pull back the database. Now I'm going to do a little demonstration of this. This is an overview of my demonstration environment. Is Tivoli Storage Manager 7.1.1 Tivoli Storage Manager for Virtual Environments 7.1.1. I'm using data protection for SQL Server 7.1.1. And my infrastructure is a combination of Windows 2012 and 2012 R2. I happen to be running SQL Server 2012, although SQL Server 2014 is also supported. And I happen to be running VMware vSphere 5.5. Now, I did want to point out before I get into this demonstration that there's a very good white paper which you can Google for, or I'll attach to the video, called Tivoli Storage Manager Protecting Microsoft SQL Databases Hosted in VMware. And what this paper will do, this white paper will do, is give you all of the details on how you can go about doing this, and it will also give you some additional details. So for instance, in this video, I'm just taking the full backup that was taken with the VMware Tivoli Storage Manager for VE backup and restoring that. But you can augment the full backup with SQL log backups if you choose, and that is a supported configuration, and that white paper will give you a lot of details on how to do that and actually go through the configuration step by step. There's also some good documentation in the Tivoli Storage Manager for Virtual Environments manual and in the Tivoli Storage Manager for Databases manual, so I would take a look at both of those for details on how to run the various commands and test things and troubleshoot things. So all that being said, let's take a look at the demonstration of the database restore. Okay, so we are now ready to take a look at the demonstration of the restore. First, let's just take a look at this VMware environment. It's pretty small. I have a small number of virtual machines over here. I only have one running, the CSI SQL, which is the one I'm going to be using for doing this demonstration. Before we look at Tivoli Storage Manager for Virtual Environments, what I'd like to do is now go take a look at the Data Mover options file. And if we do that, we'll see that we have in the Data Mover this include.vm tsm vss module. And as you can see, it is pointing to this CSI SQL virtual machine. And you'll also note that for when I go to do the restore in the CSI SQL guest, what I've done is gone ahead and give that guest access to the virtual machine backup. So when I go in to restore the database, I'll have the permissions and I actually see the databases and virtual machine, the databases inside the virtual machines that are stored there. So that's what the data mover looks like. In the interest of time, I've gone ahead and I've already done a backup of this CSI SQL machine in data protection for VMware, Tivoli Storage Manager for Virtual Environments. So you can see that I have a backup of CSI SQL. It's only 23 minutes old. So next what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pull up a console on that VMware guest. So you can see here I am on a console in the virtual machine guest that is running in that VMware environment. And just so you can see that the full restore is actually taking place, what I'll do is I'll pull up SQL Server Management Studio. We'll go take a look at one of the tables in the databases. So we're going to be working with this AdventureWorks 2012 demo database. I'll go ahead and pull up the tables, and I'll go ahead and pull up this person address, and I'll go ahead and maybe edit a row just so we can see that the full database restore did happen. We'll let that pull up. And maybe I'll change this 1971 to 1965. So I'll go ahead and save that record. I'm going to go ahead and close out the tree here. And now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pull up my data protection for SQL Server console, and I'll go ahead and refresh this so that you can see what I have here is the databases that are stored in the virtual machine. And I can tell that by the fact that this backup method here is VMBSS. So essentially what that means is data protection for SQL is going out there and looking inside the virtual machine and pulling back the databases that were part of that VM backup. I'm going to go ahead and show my restore options and just check them. I'm going to go ahead and replace this database when I do the restore, and I'm going to go ahead and run recovery so that it can come up. I'll go ahead and hide restore options, and then I'll go ahead and restore the AdventureWorks database. Now while that's running, one of the things I wanted to point out to you is you'll notice there that you did have the option as to whether you wanted to run recovery and apply the transaction logs or not. So you can, if you have a different recovery point objective than your full backup that you took with the virtual machine, you can mix virtual machine backups with backups of the transaction logs. And there is a very good explanation of that in the white paper that I pointed out at the beginning of this video. So take a look at that if you want to mix transaction log backups with full virtual machine backups. For the purposes of this demonstration though, this restore completed successfully. So what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and go back to data protection for SQL Server. I'm sorry, we'll go ahead, we just did that. We'll go back to SQL Management Studio. And what I'm going to go ahead and do here is do a view refresh just to make sure I have the latest data. I'll go ahead and pull up the databases, pull up the tables, and we'll go back to the person address and just do a select top 1000 rows just so we can see. And the record that I edited back to 1965 is now restored and back to 1971. So the full database has been restored and pulled out of the virtual machine. So that concludes this demonstration. I hope you found it useful. As I suggested, take a look inside at that white paper, at the documentation for full details on how to set this up with Tivoli Storage Manager for virtual environments and Tivoli Storage Manager for databases. I look forward to seeing you soon on another video.